Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today as part of this special event, part of the UN Commission for Social Development. Our topic today is on building stronger communities and how to harness digitalization and human potential. My name is Shivani Dayal and I'll be the moderator for today's event. As a brief background of myself, I have a degree in neuroscience and a master's in public health. I'm also a lifelong meditator and have been associated with the Brahma Kumaris for many, many years now. I'm a public health professional working in the COVID-19 response in California, so I've witnessed this pandemic very up close over the past year, and I'm excited to hear different people's experiences during this event. So for those who may not know, the theme of the conference this year was on the role of digital technology in social development. As we all know, in 2020, technology really became this main tool to foster connection and community. But it also increased a lot of inequality by leaving behind many people who didn't have digital access, and thus created this digital divide. So because of this issue, the Brahma Kumaris and our partner organizations that we have here today really reaffirmed our dedication to serving rural and urban marginalized communities through a variety of multimedia methods, including radio, social media, TV, and many other ingenious methods. All of these methods really had the aim of trying to connect people to their true selves and accessing tools that they can use to then thrive in their own communities. So in today's workshop, we're going to discuss how technology can create stability in a time of uncertainty. And through these conversations with our three partner organizations here today, Radio Madhuban, Champions for Children, and Digital Impact Square, we're going to explore how we can foster resilience and nurture communities. So to give you a brief overview of today's event, we're in the introduction right now, and then we'll hear from each of our panelists who are representing three different organizations about how they're using technology to build community. We'll then have an interactive panel discussion followed by a Q&A with the audience, and then a short reflection and a meditation before our closing. On a technical announcement level here, we have a few items. The first is that this event is being recorded and it is being live streamed to YouTube right now. If you would like the YouTube link, it is currently just posted in the chat. If you would like to share it with anybody else who is welcome to join via the YouTube link. There will be a chance, as you saw in the agenda, for a Q&A at the end of this session. So throughout the event, as you come up with a question, feel free to write it down and send it to the participant labeled #questions in the chat. So if you click on the chat button and send the question directly to #questions, that will make it nice and easy for us during the Q&A segment. Lastly, we will keep everybody muted during this event for the sake of simplicity, but we would love to see you engaging in the chat, and we would love to also see your smiling faces. So if you're able and willing to have your cameras on, we would love to see all of your sparkling faces today. And for best viewing, we suggest keeping the event in gallery view. So if you click on the top right corner where it says view, just make sure it says speaker view. Speaker view is the best way to optimize the viewing for this event. So keep yourself in speaker view throughout the event. Okay, lovely. So now let's go to the next slide. And the UN is all about fostering global connections. So I wanted to take a moment to just highlight the global voices that we have represented in this virtual room right here, right now. I myself am based in California. The Brahma Kumaris UN office is based in New York City. We'll be highlighting today, I'll highlight shortly, some programs that have been conducted by the Brahma Kumaris in Washington, DC and London. We'll later have a musical performance by a Japanese artist. And then we have our three representatives from our partner organizations who are based in Florida and in two different parts of India. So as you can see, we're already quite a global group right now. but we would love to hear where you're zooming in from. So if you want to just put in the chat what city or state or country you are currently in right now, we would love to see where you're calling in from. So I'll pause for a second just to give people a chance to write in the chat. Let's see how far we've gone. All right, we've got the East Coast of Canada. Wonderful, welcome. Oxford, UK, amazing. Oh, a French citizen based in India, currently in NYC. Can't get more global than that. Albany, New York, Bronx, New York. Fantastic. Anybody else out there? All right, we've got some good representation, I think, of some different countries, different states and cities. Bangalore, India, welcome. All right, thank you so much. It's so amazing to see where you all are from, because we're all coming here with different backgrounds and different stories. And yet here we are today in this shared space of this shared event, and with this shared strange experience of living through a global pandemic together. So I want to take us a moment to just reflect first. Let's take a breath and reflect on how our connections with our community has changed over this past year. The theme of this event, as you've seen, is really about those connections to community. So how have your connections with your community changed over the past year? What role has technology played in that change? And how has your access to technology sustained or challenged you during this time? So take a few moments, think about these questions, jot down a few notes, and whatever you're comfortable sharing, we would love to have you put in the chat so we can start sharing some of these experiences. All right, I'll be silent and just create some space to reflect. All right, we've got someone sharing about how technology has enabled their team to actually help more members of the visually impaired community accessing information about COVID-19. That's amazing. Sounds like technology has really helped maybe increase access there. Would anybody else like to share their experiences, any part of it? It doesn't have to be the full thing. How have your connections changed? How has technology played a role in that? Any challenges to that technology sustaining you? Okay, we've got someone writing about how maybe they resisted in the beginning using those online classrooms for many years in the past. I know it's hard to make a change like that. But then with COVID, Debbie has become a convert to this space and will have deep conversations that I didn't think could previously happen online. That's wonderful. Yeah, I think this has really pushed us to interact with technology differently and maybe push past some of the resistances that we had originally. Oh, Robert here is highlighting how every meeting is like a reminder of the separation and connectedness. Yeah, that duality. We're both separate and still connected. It's sort of a strange space to be in there. Wonderful. We'll keep sharing them in. We'll keep looking at them. If you haven't had a chance to finish your reflection, feel free to jot down those questions and keep thinking about them later today. I think it is a good exercise to think through, I know for myself. I'll just see, we've got Juliet talking about some connections grew stronger while some connections grew weaker. Definitely. Maybe she had some more free time and technology enabled me to build stronger connections with friends, family, colleagues. Yeah, by taking the time to call people who didn't live in the same area as I do. Definitely, I experienced the same thing as well. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. So I want you to keep all of those thoughts and feelings in mind as we continue to discuss how the different NGOs have tried to build community during this challenging time. And that's precisely what the Brahmakumari World Spiritual University has tried to do as well. So the mission of this NGO is to provide simple and accessible education in spiritual universal principles, to try to build that inner strength and reaffirm the dignity and worth of every single human being. In order to achieve that vision, all of the Brahmakumari's services, including the meditation classes, which is the core sort of staple of the group, are provided entirely for free for the community and are organized by a group of volunteers as well. Everything's run on donation. Another unique aspect of the NGO is that it's actually primarily led by women, which is also incredible when you think especially about this digital divide and how technology often also has a gender gap, with different genders having different levels of access to technology. So here's another unique way where the Brahmakumaris is trying to address and work in that space. So there are thousands of BK programs run around the world, but there are two that I wanted to highlight today because of their work during the COVID-19 pandemic. So the first was the Brahmakumaris group in London began a new series during the pandemic called Live Morning Meditations. So the goal here was to, and if we can go to the next slide here, the goal was to give people a free resource that could help them create mental stability during this time of chaos. So they started these live streamed morning meditations on Facebook that were about 30 minutes long, and their live streams now have over 1,000 daily viewers with over 12,000 followers on Facebook and a global audience. So this is really an example of harnessing the power of social media to create these connections and community among people. They were actually recently recognized by the London Faith and Belief Forum for their community service. And if you would like to listen to some of these meditations, you can find them on Facebook at Brahmakumaris UK. And to get a taste of, what those meditations are like, we'll take a quick 1-minute meditation journey with a meditation called Jam. It's part of a series called Just a Minute, or Jam. It's a series that has 1-minute meditation videos. So let's experience one really quickly together so you can get a flavor.
Relaxing my mind. Taking just a minute, I sit comfortably relaxed, inviting my senses to relax, meeting them as friends, appreciating the work they do. I now choose to give them a break. I imagine closing the motorways of my senses. My thoughts begin to slow down. my mind becomes clear. For a few moments, nothing is moving. My mind is free, resting. I now return with clarity.
Okay, did you like that 1-minute trip? We just went deep and then emerged again. So if you like those, there are many more at Just a Minute Meditations, and again, the at Brahmakumari's UK Facebook page. The second program that I wanted to highlight is using a more traditional technology of radio. So America Meditating Radio has over 1,700 shows focused on well-being and mental health and meditation. It started in 2013 and is now on demand on 12 different networks, and they have over 1 million subscribed archived listeners. So this program is hosted and produced by this group of diverse women that are really trying to bring diverse voices to spiritual discussions. They've had guest speakers ranging from actresses like Whoopi Goldberg to politicians like former US Ambassador Mark Irwin. So a wide range here. There's something for everybody, so I encourage you to check them out as well. It's also really interesting because it's often the newest or latest technologies that can have a tendency unintentionally to leave people behind and create these further inequities. But radio is one of the oldest forms of technology that still has the power to reach millions of people. And I think we'll be hearing a little bit more about the power of radio from one of our panelists later today. So now I'd like to just take a step back here and really look at the bigger picture. As we continue our discussions, we need to remember that technology is a tool, not the goal in and of itself. Our organizations that are here today are not inherently technology organizations that were created for the purpose of furthering tech. Instead, the organizations here are gathered with the intention to serve humanity, and they happen to be using technology to help serve that larger purpose. So it's really important to keep the intention with which technology is being used in mind. We'll hear more about those intentions when we hear from our panelists. So to briefly introduce them to you right now, we have Karen Prus from Champions for Children, Krishna Katakam, thank you, hi Karen. We have Krishna Katakam from Radio Madhuban. Wonderful, hi Krishna. And we have Bhanu Prasad from Digital Impact Square. Hello. So each of our panelists is going to talk about their work and how their work is helping to build stronger communities, how they're using technology to achieve those goals, and what lessons they've learned on how to build connections between people. So with that, I'd like to now invite Karen Cruz to the stage. Karen is a parent educator for Champions for Children and is a tireless advocate for children in need. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Karen. Hello, welcome.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you. So if we can bring up the slides. There we go. Thank you so much. So Champions for Children has a vision to eradicate child abuse all over the world. Our intended impact is to offer services to all families in Hillsborough County, Florida, so that they are empowered to raise safe, strong, and thriving children who are ready to learn and successfully transition to adulthood. Champions for Children's programs can be particularly helpful for families that struggle with substance abuse, mental health issues, domestic violence, financial hardships, or other chronic stress. Our program impact aims to reduce the traumas associated with adverse childhood experiences and increase a family's protective factors. Next slide. So this slide just kind of gives you a snapshot of the various programs that Champions for Children offers. And as I said before, they're open to all families and all children located in Hillsborough County, Florida. And our programs range from meeting prenatal needs all the way through school age. Next slide. So this is just to give you a snapshot of Hillsborough County. There are just under 1.5 million residents. About 100,000 of those are children under the age of 5. Of the 900 kindergarten classrooms across the county, 53% of children arrive not ready to learn, and 60% come from economically disadvantaged homes. And as you can see from this graph on the slide here, Hillsborough County has the highest number of children who are victims of child abuse and have to be removed from the home. And about 50% of those children are under the age of 5. So when the COVID pandemic hit, we realized we had no time to lose because there were even more stressors than ever in the homes, and our families were even more isolated. So we needed to find a way to be able to continue to provide support and services to our families without putting them or our staff at risk. And we were really able to just seamlessly move over to using, to go from in-person services to using Zoom and other similar formats. And we found that these were very easy to use, very user-friendly for both our staff and our families who were not accustomed to using technology. And they were able to be used on laptops, tablets, and cell phones. You can move to the next slide. So we know that every family faces challenges, and every family has a strength that they can draw on when things get tough. So we're working towards building a community that is fluent in building these strengths that can help parents feel more confident, less stressed, better connected to their kids. So we are working with these protective factors shown here in this slide so that we are building more resilient families and helping adults realize their vision of being a successful parent. So all of our programs, regardless of their model or curriculum, are based on using these protective factors. And research shows that when these protective factors increase, risks decrease. And we also have evidence to show that in participation with Champions programs, we are able to increase these protective factors. Next slide. So the tools that I picked that Champions uses are both strength and connection. And both of these tools have two aspects. So under strength, it is we use a strength-based approach in working with our families. We use the Brazelton touch points approach in which all of our staff, including administration, are trained. This philosophical approach guides us to work with families to ensure their dignity and respect by making some positive assumptions such as all parents have strength, all parents want to do well by their child, all parents have ambient feelings. And we not only use the strength-based lens to see our families, but we verbalize these strengths that we see by focusing on the parent-child relationship, using the child's positive behavior as our language, and valuing passion where we find it. So this might look something like saying, "Oh, I can see your baby's body is so relaxed while you're holding her. She must feel very safe and secure in your arms." And we also build stronger families by using the protective factors that I already mentioned. So when we look at ways to fortify these protective factors, we're able to enable the family to develop the ability to overcome any adversity they may face. And then under connection, by using our strength-based approach and validating and building on our parents' strengths, we in turn build strong, trusting connections with the family so that they stay engaged in services and are opening and accepting of our help. Also, as part of building the family's protective factors, we're also connecting them to other resources outside of Champions and improving their ability to utilize resources so that they can continue to thrive. And then our outcomes. There we go. So during the pandemic, we got a generous grant from the United Way to be able to distribute 13 hotspots and tablets to our families who did not have access to technology. We also initiated a parent warm line so that parents could call in to get access to resources, advice on how to handle particular situations with their children, or just someone to talk to in case that they were having a moment. We also realized that some of our classes, especially those geared towards parent education, actually had an increase in attendance over in person because barriers such as transportation and childcare were removed. So going forward, we will probably continue to use technology to remove those barriers even after we return to in-person services. Thank you.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Karen, for sharing that work. It sounds like COVID has really challenged every organization, but you guys have really adapted, and it sounds like it actually has ended up probably in an improvement of access and services for those who need it. So that's such a great utilization of a challenge into a strength. So I would now like to invite Krishna Katakam to speak about her work with Radio Madhuban. So Sister Krishna is the production head of this community radio station based in Rajasthan, India, and she works very closely with all types of community leaders to really empower people and give them access to information through radio. So welcome, Sister Krishna.
Thank you. Warm greetings from India, Bharat. So Radio Madhuban is basically a community radio station that is this is Rohi, which is very 11, and we broadcast 24/7, and we make sure that we broadcast moral values, and we always speak the positive content on the radio. And we broadcast around 30 programs on radio in the local languages, that is Hindi, Marwari, and the other tribal languages, because our 80% of the community is covered with the tribal population. And during this 24/7 broadcasting, we broadcast 16 hours of fresh broadcast, and we make sure that all the content is from the community. And it is entirely run by the volunteers who are contributing in production, programming, and other parts of radio operations. And apart from these 24 volunteers who are regularly working with the radio, and there are many other volunteers who work indirectly who work and help us indirectly in other ways. Next slide. So our focus areas are, as you see, the SDGs, and we broadcast and produce programs for the radio. But at the same time, we go to the local villages to understand our community. We do the focus group discussions with them, and we after knowing their necessities, and after knowing what is that they're looking forward, we make the programs on radio and we broadcast them. Again, we go to the local communities to narrowcast and take the feedback if the program that is we made is really up to the point of their need. And we undertake many different community development projects from the different organizations, and also we do conduct different projects according to the necessity. And we also organize workshops for the local youth because as a community radio stations, we are the only platform for them to explore their opportunities here, because it is a very small town, and we don't have many avenues for the youth to explore what kind of careers that can be made. So radio is a big platform for them to learn and explore the career point of view and their life too. And we also conduct skill development programs and trainings at the radio for the radio operations to be a radio jockey and a producer and a designer and a programmer and a script writer, whatnot, whatever they want to learn in radio operations, we conduct trainings. And over a period of 10 years, there are many young children and youth who are trained, and now they have chosen their own life and making using these skills in their personal life. Next, please. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, it's entirely different because we cannot go to community directly. So we had to use the platform of digital. Of course, we are using technology in spreading the information, education, and entertainment as a radio. But going to the communities and talking to them was a big challenge. But we made sure that we use the available technology. It is also an opportunity for us to learn using these Google Meet, Zoom, and other platforms. And in this COVID-19, we have launched 4 different programs. That is Hamrahi, especially for the disabled people, visually challenged, impaired people, how they are able to connect with each other and then communicate with each other. And then the next thing is about the climate change. Nayi Dunya Naya Zamana is the program name. And this pandemic is also a result of environment, we can say maybe. So another program is about governance, is the Yojana Unka Pitara, where we spread awareness about the government schemes that are needed to be aware of. Because community radio is something where people get to reach about their government schemes, because it is the only media that reaches the rural population. And during the pandemic, we also did many projects with different national and international and local NGOs and partners. So apart from these projects that you are seeing on the screen, we also did many programs on the Facebook to engage the youth and to use their potentials. So main focus was on the spreading awareness on COVID-19, being in connection with the local administration, and uh, focusing and stressing on wearing the mask and maintaining social distancing and other necessities, other necessary things that they have to follow in the local community. So the next slide. So the 2 tools that we have used is, the first is the community engagement. When the COVID-19 was little calmed down, we started going to the local communities and spreading awareness about the different projects that we were doing. And during the COVID-19, also we made sure that we use the digital technology to engage the community. And without the community engagement, there is no meaning for the community radio station. So whatever we did during this COVID-19, also we made sure that we engaged the local community. And we had Zoom calls where the listeners were participating and sharing their experiences with us. And then we had the programs of Corona Warriors, where the frontline warriors were sharing their experiences. And we had a youth participation in these things. So the next slide, please. So the other tool that we used is well-being, because happiness is something everybody looks forward in our life. And when everybody was aloof and staying at home, everybody was looking for some warmth and some hi, hello, and the entertainment, you may say, or a well-being that people look forward to. So this is technology that made us connect with these people, and especially the youth. We had different programs, as we said, and this made the community feel very warm, being at home, engaged, and they did not feel being bored, sitting at sitting between the 4 walls. So well-being was something that we made sure that people being at home are engaged, and they are able to use their time very potentially. At the same time, they are happy. So the programs that we did was we made sure that their time is utilized properly, and they are happy. Thank you.
Wow. It sounds like your workload really increased during the COVID pandemic with so many new programs happening all the time. I'm sure that everybody felt very sustained by all of the service you guys were doing. So I would like to now, lastly but not least, invite Banu Prasad to talk about Digital Impact Square. So Banu is the head of ecosystem development and brings with him a great spirit of innovation and entrepreneurship to this discussion we're having today. So welcome, Banu.
Thank you. Nice to be here with all of you. From all the speakers before me, I can clearly sense when passion to serve becomes your profession. I think I'm very lucky in the same way where a passion to serve the community actually became my job. So I'm very proud and happy to introduce the organization that I'm representing today, which is Digital Impact Square. As the name suggests, we are a non-profit organization focusing on using digital technologies to create sustainable social impact. And we are based in a tier 2 city in India called Nasik, which is about 100 miles from Mumbai. And next slide, please. What Digital Impact Square is, a Digital Impact Square is a sandbox of innovation, a sandbox of creating social change through technology. Our core vision is to create change makers. Our focus is young innovators between the age of 19 to 26 who come with the passion to address social challenges. And we provide them with the skills that are needed to understand problems on the ground using deep immersion, and then understand the beneficiaries and how we could use the digital technology to solve these social challenges. We lay a great deal of emphasis on immersion, that is understanding the social challenges on the ground first. You can see a beautiful photograph of our campus. It's a completely philanthropic initiative where young innovators from across the country are invited to come and apply. We receive over 400 applications each year. We select only about 40 of them and then put them through a rigorous program for about 18 months and encourage them to create social enterprises while addressing pressing social challenges for the country. Over the last 5 years, we have had over 430 innovators who have gone through this program, and we are very proud and happy that we have 12 social enterprises that are today addressing key social challenges in the country. Among them, 45 of them have chosen to continue this path of being an entrepreneur addressing social challenges or taken up careers that actually create impact in the society. Among our startups across health, education, working for the citizens, or agriculture, I'd just like to highlight a few. We work uh, with adherence to TB medication, tuberculosis medication for multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. The Pre-Leaf Technology is a company that is working to reduce maternal mortality and detecting high-risk pregnancies as early as possible. Trestle Labs, which I'll also be sharing a little about later, works with the visually impaired community in trying to create accessible resources for the visually impaired. Also, we have several companies that are working on providing access and resources for farmers using the digital technology and increasing their livelihoods. Next slide, please. During the COVID time, all our operations, because we lay such a great deal of emphasis on immersion, our operations were severely impacted because we had to go on the ground, we had to understand the problems upfront and create social change using that. But once we had COVID and the lockdowns were declared, it became extremely difficult for us to actually go on the ground and do this. But this is where a lot of our partnerships and the investment that we had done in the relationships over the years actually helped us. So I'm sharing our experience of not only creating these great technology tools, but also the people behind it and the relationships behind it that actually made this possible. So what you see on the screen here is some of the work that we did in in actually removing those fears and anxieties. We launched one of the first self-assessment platforms in the country, where when at the peak of the pandemic hysteria, at the crisis as it was unfolding, we found that it was essential to create an awareness and also to create a sense of calm and control for the citizens. And within the first 30 days, we received excellent response from the users of this. And we also were able to use this to feed this data into our call centers and so on with the state government, feed it to the state government so that they could take further action. We also worked on contact tracing, created one of India's first contact tracing applications, and also monitoring the potential COVID patients through home quarantines and the travelers and so on. This is where we partnered with educational institutions, with MIT in the USA. We partnered with the National Health Authority of India and also the Maharashtra state, the state in which we implemented this, the Innovation Society there. So it was a pure collaboration between experts, between individuals who are extremely passionate about creating impact, all of them coming together and putting the solutions on the ground. One thing that we realized is, while we could not normally, when we develop technology, we would follow a life cycle where we would understand what the problem is, we would go down to the users and test it, we would have multiple iterations. In this case, we had absolutely no access to our users. We had to rely on excellent advisors, public health professionals who were able to form that bridge and whom we had worked with in the past few years. And those people had now volunteered to become bridges for us between the people on the ground and between the people who are building the technology. And those relationships actually mark the strength and the power of the tools that we eventually develop. Next slide, please. Not only did we do our COVID response through Digital Impact Square, but as I mentioned earlier, Digital Impact Square also nurtures many social enterprises. So wherever possible, we requested, and sometimes our social enterprises on their own found ways to pivot and change their technology solutions so that it could cater to the demands of a pandemic that is happening in the country. You just heard earlier from Akshita in the comment section about how she mentioned visually impaired students, over 25,000 different government documents, guidelines, standard operating procedures, rules, and safety procedures were given out by the government. But many of these documents, unfortunately, could not be translated or could not be accessible because they were created at such pace and they were almost always changing weekly basis or every few weeks. So these documents were continuously translated, converted them into accessible formats so that the visually impaired users could have access to them and then adhere to the guidelines that the government is passing. Similarly, we took an e-pass system, that could ensure that the migrants who are traveling across borders to all the corners of the country, important resources, key resources from one location to the other, safety and emergency personnel if they had to move, all of these people had to get an e-pass so that they could safely move when the country was in lockdown. So 4.5 million e-passes were generated in a short period of about 45 days to make sure that this movement was enabled and all of the authorized movement was possible. Another major challenge that we found was in the supply chains getting completely disrupted because the entire ecosystem was shut down. At that time, we enabled our existing startup called Vesatago, which was already working with farmers in providing logistics and ensuring they had access to the markets. We asked them to change their technology solution to be able to cater to farmers and make sure that they all the way connected to the street hawkers and vendors who were able to provide these vegetables and fruits to the citizens. So you could imagine the number of livelihoods that is impacted, everybody from the farmers, the logistics providers, the drivers, and also the vendors who would not lose their daily livelihood as a result of this pandemic. So this was an opportunity to serve a large scale population using the same technology, but then using it in a very innovative way to satisfy the needs of the pandemic. Next slide, please. What are our core lessons learned from this process? One of the things that I continue to emphasize in almost all our lessons learned sharing sessions has been that there is tremendous value in the relationships that we create. During the pandemic, we had volunteers from across the country and some outside across the world. When we shared the problem statements and the issues that we were facing, we received help from all over the world. We also found that several past relationships that we had created in solving our regular social challenges at Digital Impact Square, all of them were leveraged to be able to make sure that we created a crisis response team and delivered response quickly. The second important lesson is during a crisis, we need to explore opportunities to repurpose existing technology, because how do we make sure that technology that is serving as one need probably can be diversified and help many others at that particular time. Similarly, an important lesson is when we design products and technology today, how can I keep this in mind that tomorrow this same technology could be used for a dual purpose in case of a crisis. Finally, I would also like to emphasize this, that innovation lies in creating symbiotic ecosystems and execution, not in the technology itself. We found that how do we innovatively create relationships and create execution models that actually defined how successful we could be. Next slide, please. Our tools, the tools that I would like to summarize based on our experience has been cooperation. What we realized as an organization is, as I mentioned about the relationships and the impact that they have, is do I look at what opportunity I have to contribute in a crisis instead of expecting something from others first. So this is, as an organizational culture, I found this to be a hallmark of successful organizations during the pandemic, where we were first to get into a group, get into a crisis response team and ask, how can we help you? And similarly, in the process, we received help, unconditional help back in response. And then when we were able to work in teams like this, then we were able to achieve our common objectives. So having the spirit of cooperation, having this attitude that I have something to offer, I have something to give, I think was a big lessons learned and a tool that we were able to use. And also as an individual, we found that there were several who had the passion, the interest, and the skills that were necessary to actually serve and to be of use. How do we make them have access to the needs that are required? So that was another important cooperation. We found simple tools like Google spreadsheets and simple contacts and phone numbers and SMSs, several ways in which we could connect skills to the needs that were required in developing a pandemic response. And second tool is simplicity. We found as part of our work, we lay a lot of emphasis on empathy, understanding the other user, putting yourself in their shoes and trying to really understand the problems that somebody is facing. The pandemic told us that you can't go close to someone, you can't actually meet your users. But this is something that was so important for us to be able to understand what the administration, what the frontline workers are actually going through. And when we are looking at the problems that they are facing, we realize that we need to make sure that their life is made simple. They're already burdened with several instructions, several directions, and the workloads were like 20, 24 hours a day, these frontline workers. So we had to make all our technology extremely simple to deploy and use. So simplicity was another tool that we believe we learned and we are used in this pandemic response. Towards all of this, an important question comes up. How do we make sure that we are remaining sane during this entire process? One of the things that we learned at Digital Impact Square is that self-talk, talking to ourselves in an organized way, in a structured way, having reflective practices of silence and making sure that there is churning and introspection, we found to be extremely important during this process. What you see in the photographs are actual photographs of innovators sitting for an evening reflection time, where they would reflect on the day and the kind of difficult challenges that they had to address and how they could handle failure, which almost happened every day while addressing social challenges. Next slide, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing all the incredible work you all are doing. I think each one of your organizations is so inspiring, and thank you for highlighting the specific tools that have been helpful for your organizations and your work. I think that those tools really leave us with a valuable toolbox, so to speak, that we can each all apply to our own lives and our own work. And I think if we tried to visualize this toolbox, it might look something like this. All right, so here's our lovely toolbox that I think if we sort of extract some of the main points from the three talks that we've just heard, we heard highlights about strength, about the importance of community engagement, simplicity, connection, well-being, and cooperation. So these are the 6 anchors here that these wise souls have found to be the most useful in their work. And I think as a handy way to remember it, we can, if you just remember one thing from this event, you can remember the SCW with a little bit of squares and cubes in there. So we've got S squared, C cubed, and W, an easy way to remember all 6 of these valuable tools moving forward. So with that, I want to move us into our panel discussion. We have about 7 minutes for some questions as a discussion with the panelists before we have a few minutes for the Q&A. So if everybody can keep it nice and brief and essenceful, that would be wonderful. So my first question here, we'll add everybody to our wonderful gallery. All right, welcome. So all of you have touched on it a little bit in your own work, but if some of you want to talk just a little bit more explicitly about what role you think technology can play in decreasing inequalities, that would be wonderful. As I said, some of you, your work clearly is addressing these inequalities, but if you just want to speak more broadly to this idea of relationship between technology and inequalities globally, we would love to hear from a few of you.
I can take a stab in a very brief way. Our experience of reducing inequalities starts with making technology extremely simple, almost invisible, and not necessarily make it too high tech. I think there is probably no need for a new technology to solve today's social challenges. It's probably the way you can simplify it and present those technologies to the most number of people in the most simplest form. That's one input that I could share.
Beautiful, thank you.
So when we say technology, technology is not a complete solution that we have also seen this, because the rural population that we serve, they are yet to be access to the technology. They use mobile phones, but there's one mobile phone for one family. And with that, they have to make sure that they have all the communication. Even to listen to the radio, they need that one single phone. If the father is going out to have some earnings, then the family is losing the communication. So when we have broadcasted audio lessons, the school lessons, as they could not go to the schools. So our local NGOs have helped us going to the local children, putting up one radio and making them sit in the social distancing and wearing masks, and then they study. So there is this challenge in the rural areas to connect with technology and sustain themselves.
Wow.
Yeah, I think too, one of the lessons that we learned is that technology can be used to help break down barriers. From people who cannot attend in-person services due to not having childcare or not having transportation or maybe health restrictions. So learning that technology is a useful tool to help bridge those gaps.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is sort of contrasting those two elements that Sister Krishna and Karen have just highlighted, that in a way technology can both create barriers and can reduce barriers. And so there's sort of this duality to technology where it just has this ability to both increase and decrease access depending on the population you're working with. And I think that's a very important awareness to have, is to recognize that this technology isn't the simple solution to every problem. It really depends on the context and the community and what issues exactly you're trying to address there. So absolutely. Will you talk a little bit about the risks or challenges of using technology to try to build community? You know, as we just mentioned, it's not always the answer. There are many challenges that do come. So what are some of those challenges or risks that come with this strategy?
When we use technology with the rural population, they are not very well aware about it. Suppose like Zoom or the Facebook. Facebook, they're still they still use the youth, but Zoom is something that even we learned during this pandemic how to use, and because we had to communicate with the local community, so all these technical virtual platforms to communicate with these people. So we literally had to sometimes teach them how do you log in, how do you create your email ID, you know, all these things. So this is something that we learned, and then we also shared them to learn.
Wow. Anybody else have thoughts on this?
I think for us, you know, with using technology, there's a difference between having access to it and being able to manage it. You know, especially with us working with families and they're trying to handle their children as well as the technology, and finding that that's sometimes could be very challenging for families.
Absolutely.
I would like to share one more point here. When people start using technology, they don't know what is right and wrong, like the fake news is that they get from where they are getting, especially the forward messages that they get on the Facebook or the social media. So we had to educate them what is the right information to be followed during the pandemic, because there are a lot many different messages that are coming up every day. Even the government is yet to understand how to deal with the COVID-19, and there are a lot of rumors and misunderstandings about the COVID. So we every day have to educate them what is the right news and what is the wrong news, and which source do you have to follow and believe in it, and how do you check the right source of information. So we also had to take up these projects to educate them.
Yeah, fake news, I think globally has become such an issue now of learning how to make those judgments and discernments. And it's something that moving forward, I think needs to be part of everybody's education, even in schools, of how do you assess what's real and what is fake. It's very difficult. So that's wonderful that you're able to help provide some of that education through radio. I'll have one last question for you, but I want to remind the audience that after this third question here, we will open up for a few minutes of Q&A. So if you do have any questions for our lovely panelists here, please write them in English to the chat participant that's labeled #questions. So if you have questions for our panelists, please send them now to #questions in the chat. Okay. So my last question to the three of you right now is this idea of nurturing and nurturing yourself. All of you are working in incredibly challenging fields. There's a lot of emotional drainage that can happen from dealing with all of these social problems. And there's something that many of us know is compassion fatigue that can happen when you're working so closely with communities, or you're working so closely with inequalities and just the roughness of the world, where it starts to hurt you, your emotional well-being, you become drained, and then it's easy to just stop caring because you can't have any more compassion in order to try to protect yourself here, which obviously is not what we want. We want to have this balance. So I would love to hear from each of you about how you nurture yourselves while you're doing this work that you're doing.
I shared earlier about our experience of, so we were dealing with two challenges here. One was young people who are looking to address social challenges. These are mostly young ones who have probably come out of college, probably have 1 or 2 years of experience in the professional world, and have never actually seen the kind of challenges and the difficulties, the sorrow and the challenges that they have to solve every single day on the field. So what we found was to embrace failure and to celebrate that every single day you'll not necessarily be successful, and a lot of conversations. So both reflection inward as well outward create a safe space so that those who are actually on the ground innovating can actually share their feelings openly and share them freely so that they don't get judged. And those opening up conversations are the ones actually that help realize that this is something that everybody is in it together and they can support each other.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
So the situation is such that we cannot change anything, and then we had to accept whatever it is. But the next moment that we have to see is that we are highly spirited to continue serve the community, and it's because we are sitting in front of the microphone and speaking to them. So we have to make sure the people, whoever is listening to us, also should be on the high spirits. So we may for that we have to be first happy, contented, and then accepted with the situation, and then how to deal with it we have to be ready with. So that made us think and reflect on how do we deal with it, and then we came up with different projects and different programs to make sure that our community is also happy, and then they feel home and then family. So ultimately we have seen that our listeners were very happy, because after the COVID, of course still COVID is going on, but if you see the figures, there's the level of depression has increased. People are not interested to go to the offices back again, and then they are not in a good mood to do anything, like there's no the zeal and the enthusiasm that they used to be before. So we made sure that these things do not go away from their life, because these are the things that makes the person move in life. So we worked on those things.
Yeah, as you said, you can't spread the happiness or joy if you don't feel it yourself, and that comes through, I think, in everybody's voice. So they would be able to tell if the person on the radio wasn't feeling it themselves. So absolutely, it's very important to keep that spirit and nurture that spirit of yourself. Mr. Karen, is there anything else you'd like to add about your own strategies for sort of self-care and nurturing?
So as an agency, we've done a lot of check-ins with our supervisors, and then as an agency coming together as an agency once a month, and then a supervisor once a week, just as a sounding board to talk and to check in and to offer support. And then for myself personally, I find, spending time with nature, exercising, and I think having a spiritual knowledge as a guidepost and a foundation, and then belonging to a spiritual community where you're with other people who have similar beliefs as you and who can offer that uplifting and positive companionship.
Mm. Absolutely. That's so invaluable, being connected to a community and having those support systems. And I feel the same way about nature as well. I think whenever I'm stressed or worried, going on a walk and, sitting under a tree or just watching the birds or something like that can really just help calm the whole body down. Wonderful. Well, thank you all for sharing your techniques. I think we can take those all with us. I do see we have a couple questions from the audience in. So this first one is about how can we specifically support women of color by harnessing digitalization? So just to repeat the question again, how can we support women of color by harnessing digitalization?
That is a wonderful question. At Champions, we don't specifically target women of color, but we are open to all families in Hillsborough County, and so supporting our moms through prenatally, we do have a campaign to make breastfeeding more culturally acceptable, because sometimes it's not in that particular demographic. And then also just supporting moms, including single moms, through whether it be childbirth, doulas, and home visiting programs, that sort of thing.
Definitely. Those are great programs. Any other thoughts or responses? I think maybe one thing that I can add just as an outsider learning about these organizations is I think one key to a lot of their success is that the people who are running the organization are also part of that community that they're trying to serve. You know, for example, the DJs at Radio Madhuban are living in Rajasthan in the same, you know, relatively rural place and can maybe understand some of those problems more closely than if they were, you know, living in a luxury building in Mumbai. So there's a connection there that happens. It's not necessarily the same as a lived experience, but that I think there's a proximity that happens and an understanding and an empathy that can happen when the people who are part of the leadership are also part of the community, and specifically also women, since the question was asking about this. You know, Krishna Ben or Bhanubai, maybe you can speak to how women are operated in your excuse me in your organization.
So, women, of course, play a major role in the development of the society because they are the creators and they are the ones who teach us what is right and wrong, what to do in life, and become ambitious in the life. All these things we learn from our mother. So, giving them a chance to believe in what they are doing, what they're thinking, and appreciating them makes them move forward. Most of the times in this patriarchal society, they are not given an opportunity to come in the front and share their ideas. And the second thing is they are not supported with the ideas what they come up with. So these two things have to be taken care. Then we can see the beautiful world.
In our work, we are very happy and proud that more than, I would say, at least 40% of our innovators are women. Each year, in sometimes we have a majority of women, young women who actually have personally lived through challenges, and we were very happy that they were onboarded onto our system. So we do it two ways. We look at the founders of our companies, several of them are women, several award-winning social enterprises that we have been able to create. And we often take those stories of women who have actually overcome adversities themselves and put them as role models when we go out and actually look up other next cohort of innovators that have to come and join us. So those women entrepreneurs have themselves come from tier 2, tier 3 cities and overcome adversities are role models for future generations. And we have actually seen more and more come looking at the kind of achievements that they have been able to do. So that's one way we are engaging and happy to see the women innovators.
That's amazing. I know I'm here in California in Silicon Valley, and I know that this gender gap that happens in technology is a very big deal and very important to overcome in this space as more startups are being created. So that's wonderful that you seem to have that dedication to making sure that there's more equity in that space. All right, so I would now like to, that seems to be all the questions that we have from our audience. So I'll move us now to the final segment of our program. We were just given a lot of information, and I think it's time that we take a few minutes to process all of that input. So I'd like to now invite you to reflect on these two questions that will be shared on the screen. We'll put those questions in the chat, and while you think, we'll have a special musical performance by an award-winning Japanese violinist, Ayako Ichimura. So you'll then have a few more minutes to reflect after the performance, and then you'll be taken on a short guided commentary before we close out the event. So here are our two questions. The first is, of our toolbox that we had, if you can actually go back one quick slide, just as a refresher for the audience, here's our lovely toolbox. So of these tools that we have discussed, which one has stood out to you, and how are you going to apply that to your own work? And if we go to the next slide, the reflection questions again. So which of those tools has stood out? How will it be used in your work? And what will you take with you from this discussion? What are you going to take with you moving forward? So think about these as you listen to some beautiful music. Ah, beautiful. So we would love to hear from you again about what you're taking with you. If you would like to put that in the chat so we can all take those nuggets of information, we'll put the questions up again on the screen. We would love to hear from you in the chat about what tool has stood out to you and what you'll be taking with you. Okay, we'll let you stay in that silence then, and we'll move into our beautiful meditation.
Sitting very comfortably, I allow myself to settle down and go on an inward journey. I begin this journey by observing my mind and simplifying my thoughts. Simplicity brings stability. And in this state of stability, I build a connection with my core and see my own uniqueness, my strength with clarity. This vision of myself empowers me and makes me stronger. This beautiful connection with myself creates positive and powerful vibrations within myself. And now I visualize my community. I spread those vibrations of positivity, of love, compassion into the atmosphere so that it reaches out into the community. This is the simplest way of cooperating, connecting with the community, and bringing well-being through vibrations. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that I myself have learned so much from our speakers today, so I'd like to extend a heartfelt thank you to Karen, Sister Krishna, and Bhanu for sharing their experiences here with us today. I'd also like to give a special thanks to all of the participants joining us. This would be nothing without you, and it's been so lovely engaging with you through this digital format and hearing about your experiences. And we hope this has helped give some sustenance or feeling of connection, because we have all remained connected, just in a new way. So I would like to also extend, we have a resource page that will be shared with all of you. For those who are digitally savvy, we have a QR code here that you can scan with your phone. If you have an iPhone, there's a QR scanner in it already, or you can take a picture of this for right now. This resource page has contact information, website links, other information that our speakers have thought would be helpful to share with all of you who might be doing similar work. For those who are unfamiliar with QR codes, we should be sending out an email. Since you all registered online for this event, we should already have your email and can send that out via that over the next week or so. We would also like to invite you to an upcoming event on February 26th. In honor of Black History Month, we have a very special event with guest Clarence B. Jones, who was actually one of the speechwriters and personal advisors to Dr. Martin Luther King. So he's an incredible voice here to listen to. We have him in conversation with author Sherry Rogers, and would like to extend this special invitation to all of you to attend on January 26th. It is at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right, so we thank you all again once more for being with us. And we hope that you can take a moment to digest all of the beautiful wisdom that has been shared here with us today. And with that, I wish you all a beautiful rest of your day.